Mr. Speaker, sir, thank you for allowing me to intervene and participate in these debates. It is customary to present the debate in June. It has been the case most of the time, save for certain occasions. And coincidentally, this month of June bears witness to three very significant dates. The first, Mr. Speaker, sir, the sadly remembered 3rd of June, the date of the death anniversary of late Sir Anirudh Jagnnath, a man, a legend, a patriot, a visionary, a leader, the architect of the modern Mauritius and father of the Mauritian miracle. This year, we mark his first death anniversary. A man so firm in his conviction and driven by hard work, and true to his purpose, morphed the economy of the country in the 1980s and thereafter, all along during his 6 mandates as Prime Minister, in making Mauritius what it is today. In 1983, he founded the MSM, and the rest is history, Mr. Speaker, sir. The second very significant date in June, Mr. Speaker, sir, still has as focal point Sir Anirudh Jagnnath, the 12th June 1982. It is when Sir Anirudh led his party to win the first ever 60-0 of the political history of Mauritius. An election when Sir Anirudh stood to free the country from the shackles of fraud and corruption, of nepotism, of perverted political practices, from the disastrous economic governance of the then Labour Party. Un fait marquant, Mr. Speaker, sir, en 2014, ce même Anirudh Jagnnath stood again to lead the L'Alliance Les Pipes and free the country from these plagues of fraud, corruption and nepotism that had infected Mauritius to its core. And the third significant date this year, Mr. Speaker, sir, the 7th of June, 2022. The presentation of the 2022-2023 budget by Honorable Patrimoine. And just like my colleagues, it is important that we remind ourselves the context within which the budget has been presented. The June 2022 Global Economic Prospects of the World Bank starts its forward section by stating, and I quote, "Just over 2 years after COVID-19 caused the deepest global recession since World War II, the world economy is again in danger. This time it is facing high inflation and slow growth at the same time. Even if a global recession is averted, the pain of stagflation would persist for several years. Amid the war of Ukraine, surging inflation and rising interest rates, global economic growth is expected to slump in 2022. This is the context within which Honorable Patrimoine has presented his budget this year. And this budget had to have priorities, Mr. Speaker, sir, within reasonable and responsible parameters. This budget had to provide for sustainability of our existing sectors. It had to provide for economic growth, and it had to maintain or otherwise restore the economic balance in the purchasing power of the population. Et les mesures énoncées dans les moindres détails s'adaptent aux exigences et répondent aux nombreux défis que le pays et la population font face. Et pour cela, je dis un grand bravo. Bravo au ministre des Finances pour concevoir et présenter un budget mesuré en rapport à l'économie, un budget juste en termes d'investissement et surtout un budget à caractère humain. And Mr. Speaker, sir, why I chose to highlight the coincidental significant dates in this month of June is because there is a constant in all these 3 dates. The backdrop, Mr. Speaker, sir, is Sir Anirudh Jagnnath. And when we say Sir Anirudh, we say MSM. My colleagues of the opposition have qualified this budget of electoraliste, simply and purely because this budget is people-centric, that it centers itself around people. Let me tell you, what you fail to understand is that this budget is presented by an MSM-led government. What you fail to understand that this budget translates the philosophy of an MSM-led government, as has always been the case, whether MSM is led by Saniro Jagnat or the MSM is led by our Prime Minister, Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagnat, or whether the budget is presented by Pravin Kumar Jagnat himself as Minister of Finance. What we need to acknowledge is that a budget with the print of MSM has always been, whether it is the 12 years between 1983 to 1995, or whether it's the 5 years between 2000 to 2005, or whether it's the running years from 2014 till date, any budget and every budget is conceived and presented with the people and for the people. Under the more than 24 years cumulated economic and political governance of the MSM-led government, Mauritius has emerged from the bankrupt state in the 1982 to a vibrant and prosperous country with its people at the center of progress. In the 1980s, the economic miracle of Saniro Jagnat, Mr. Speaker, sir, the economic boom, the flourishing textile industry, the vibrant tourism sector, drastic reduction in unemployment, and the radical change in the lifestyle of Mauritians. 1980s et les années 2000, fast developing export sector and the growth of our financial sector. Et aujourd'hui, this financial sector is employing more than 40,000 professionals in Mauritius. And Honorable Padachi has for the third time presented a budget with this same socialist philosophy of the MSM. A philosophy resting on the principles of equality, individual economic freedom, and solidarity. And today, in these daunting times, when the world economy faces challenges of unprecedented nature, when because of factors beyond our control, the pandemic is not the government's out. The war in Ukraine, not the government either. Because of these factors, we are all, as a country, facing a difficult economic situation. And I should stress at this point, Mr. Speaker, sir, no need to bring Soussou or Brazil to the House with a price tag to make a show about it. We are all aware of the difficulties. And most importantly, we are not only aware, but we also understand what needs to be done. And the Minister of Finance has done it under the guidance and the support of the Prime Minister. And yes, unfortunately, Honorable Shakil Mohammed is not here. But yes, Honorable Shakil Mohammed, I say it again, under the guidance and the support of the Prime Minister. Whether you like it or not, without leadership, and essentially without a visionary and capable leadership, forget about a country, not even a political party can survive. But you will never understand that, unfortunately, because you yourself have on so many occasions rebelled and disrespected your own leader. Fortunately, we have leadership in this House. We have leadership in the country, a strong and able leader who has, against all odds, against all predictions of the World Health Organization, ensured that we remain safe against COVID, who has, in spite of all the campaigns of the opposition brought against vaccines, ensured that the vast majority of the population are vaccinated today, who has, despite 2 lockdowns and closure of businesses because of sanitary restrictions, ensured that 542 000 workers benefit from wage assistance scheme and self-employed assistance scheme for a total amount of 27.3 milliards de roupies and not losing their jobs. A leader who has, despite the prevailing economic situation, increased le salaire minimum from 10 200 to 11 075 roupies. A leader who has, despite the sharp rise in price of basic commodities and freight, has maintained subsidies on essential products to the tune of 5.2 milliards de roupies. Mr. Speaker, sir, this leader is Pravin Kumar Jagnnath. This is a leader. This is MSM-led government, Mr. Speaker, sir. And some may say that being a member of the government, I will stand, of course, to speak in favor of the budget. But, Mr. Speaker, sir, what I'm saying today is what people outside of this House are saying. People outside this House from every sector, from every quarter, surtout, Mr. Speaker, sir, les gens les plus vulnérables face à la situation économique are saying it. They are applauding this budget. They are applauding the measures which have been announced. You may say whatever you want, my friends from the opposition. You may come up with figures and baseless arguments. You may dissect, allez-y, faites l'autopsie of each and every page of the annex or the estimates. But the fact is, unfortunately, there is no argument against this budget exercise. And you know why? It is because this budget speaks the language of the people. This budget speaks to the people. This budget speaks for the people. And coming to some of those arguments, or rather criticism made, I wish, and Mr. Speaker, sir, at this point, I wish to reassure members of the opposition that I'm not saying that do not criticize. I'm not even saying that you should agree with whatever we are doing or whatever the government does. Cependant, n'oubliez pas, autant que la population juge les actions du gouvernement, la population juge également vos actions et paroles. Et quand vos prises de position sont contradictoires, parce qu'il y a quelques semaines, voire quelques jours de cela, en faisant référence au Sri Lanka, vous disiez que nous sommes au bord de la faillite. Et là, maintenant, vous remettez en question les 1 000 roupies accordées aux plus de 60 ans et 2 000 roupies accordées aux plus de 65 ans. Et là, vous dites, pourquoi pas plus de 1 000 roupies ou 2 000 roupies? Mr. Speaker, sir, to give or not to give? Donnez, pas vous donner. N'oubliez pas, la population juge également vos actions et vos paroles. Vos prises de position sont confuses et incohérentes, sans fondement, sans justification. Auparavant, vous parliez de déficit de dette. Et là, vous dites que nous avons une réserve de 36 milliards de roupies et qu'on aurait pu puiser de ce fonds. Which is which? War chest. The only chest that comes to my mind, of course, is something that we need not remind the population. Merci. Et n'oubliez pas, la population juge également vos actions et paroles. Parce que quand vous essayez vainement d'emmêler la population avec des raisonnements vides et creux, dans la foulée, l'honorable Padehachi vous a pris au pied du mur avec des mesures qui viennent soulager la population. L'honorable Padehachi a tempéré vos ardeurs en introduisant des mesures qui permettront d'augmenter le pouvoir d'achat de tout un chacun. Mr. Speaker, sir, Honorable Shakil Mohammed also virulently stated that why all these measures in 2022 and not 2021? He asked, what did they get in 2021? Referring to our elders, referring to our disabled persons, he talked about an injustice. My dear colleague of the opposition, injustice is when prior to 2014, minimum wage was just an illusion. And who corrected that injustice? Ce gouvernement-là. Injustice is when prior to 2014, a disabled person under the age of 15 years old was not eligible to any pension. And who corrected that injustice? Ce gouvernement-là. Injustice is prior to 2014. You failed to give any consideration to our elderly and said no to any increase to their pension. Who corrected that injustice? Ce gouvernement-là. Year after year, budget after budget since 2014, we are correcting injustices which were prevailing and which could have been corrected long time back. But you chose to do absolutely nothing. Mr. Speaker, sir, yesterday, when Honorable Usman Mohammed started his speech, which very honestly, I usually pay attention to, and I usually give much consideration to any of his arguments. But yesterday I was kind of puzzled and surprised with what he stated at the very beginning of his speech. He referred to a statement made by former Prime Minister of Singapore, late Lee Kuan Yew. And I would quote. So part of what Honorable Usman Mohammed said is that someone asked late Lee Kuan Yew, what is his recipe for success? So he replied, the recipe is simple. In every ministry in Singapore, the person that I put at the head of the ministry, that he or she is the most competent person. And he did not stop there. He said that the minister that I choose to put in the ministry, I make sure is more competent than the person I put as head of the ministry. And Honorable Osman goes on, this is the simple recipe that I use for Singapore. This is food for thoughts for the minister, referring to my colleague, Honorable Bikram Adoyal. Very honestly, when I heard that, I was very much confused. I was confused as to what Honorable Usman wanted to say or to convey as a message. I truly hope, and I gave him the benefit of the doubt, that he did not question the competency of my colleague, Minister Adoyal, or any other minister of this government. If not, I wish to remind the House that vous n'êtes pas apte à porter jugement sur la compétence d'aucun ministre ou d'aucun membre du gouvernement ou même qui que ce soit. The only person that is apt and able à porter jugement sur un membre de cette Chambre, que ce soit du gouvernement ou de l'opposition, c'est la population. And when the time comes, the population will assess the competency of each one of us, including yourself. Et là, la population portera jugement sur ce que l'honorable Jagat Pal a fait pendant 2 ans to help us, to guide us, to walk us through COVID. Là, la population jugera la compétence de l'honorable Siroten, who has worked day and night and who has helped us get out of the grey and black list. La population portera jugement sur l'honorable Padeachi, who has been awarded the African Minister of Finance. Il portera jugement sur l'honorable Kaviramano, who is doing a great job in terms of environment and all the measures being taken for the past 2 years. Il portera jugement sur chacun des ministres et membres du gouvernement. If you have delivered, you will be assessed as a competent minister. And mark my words, Each and every minister of this government sera jugé apte et compétent pour être réélu dans cette chambre. It is not to us, whether we are from this side or the other side, to point fingers whether we are competent or not.
What is happening there?
We need to accept in humility that everyone is giving the maximum of themselves, whether we are on the government or the opposition. Everyone is working diligently, everyone is working sincerely, everyone is working honestly, whether at the level of their ministry or whether at the level of the constituency. So leave it to the population to make the judgment and assessment. It's as simple as that. The exercise comes every 5 years. Be patient. No need to file any cases in court if you're frustrated about the result of an election. That democratic exercise repeats itself every 5 years, save for one time when elections ont été renvoyées. Et on le sait pourquoi. Mr. Speaker, sir, let me now come to my ministry and refer to some of the measures that have been announced by the Minister for the Creative Sector. Mr. Speaker, sir, en 2020, after the first wave of COVID and after the first lockdown, we were all optimistic that the sanitary conditions will allow the sector to operate and to grow back the vibrancy it had prior to COVID. But unfortunately, even 2021 was not favorable to the sector. And for these past 2 years, the sector is at a partial halt, and our artists are not being able to perform or express themselves in the conventional format, as was the case prior to the surge of the pandemic. Again, in 2021-2022, we have experienced the struggles and the financial difficulties many artists have found themselves in. Yet, despite the crisis, many established and amateur artists found ways to emerge in the public, and such positive movements remind us of the value and power of creativity. Make no mistake, our artists, cultural content creators, and workers in the sector are still suffering from not being able to work. And we are all concerned of this situation. And this is why, at the level of the ministry, we have tried to extend support to our artists in these difficult times. We have taken each and every opportunity to give them platforms to perform, be it in Mauritius or at international level, especially for established artists. Given the sanitary restrictions and difficulties for artists to find platforms to perform, we have been providing support for different initiatives from artists for virtual projects. It has been a challenge because each artistic form has its own characteristics. And we had to design and conceive means and ways to accommodate everyone. After the COVID action plan in 2020, last year, we launched the COVID-19 Artist Support Plan 2021, a scheme that was put in place to provide a financial assistance to artists who are facing the predicaments of COVID. More than 250 artists benefited from this plan, and a total of 5.6 million rupees was disbursed in the form of assistance. Independently, the National Arts Gallery supported over 30 different fine artists for the artwork acquisition program, for which 35 artworks have been acquired for some 29 artists for a total of 1.2 million rupees. A further amount of 1 million rupees is expected to be used for the acquisition of artwork for some 35 additional beneficiaries. An irregular feature which artists are acquainted with is the scheme for producing audio CDs and video clips, which has benefited some 100 artists during this financial year, and 4 million rupees has been disbursed. Mr. Speaker, sir, because of sanitary restrictions, Another very important and major event, le Festival Créole Mauricien, was not held last year. And this festival provides a source of revenue to artists, particularly in the month of December. We had to find a way to ensure that all the artists who regularly participate in this grand event are not deprived of this platform, but also are not deprived of this additional source of revenue. Following consultations with the Ministry of Tourism and the MTPA, the event was restructured into a virtual format, which enabled our artists to perform on stage and have each performance recorded for broadcasting on MBC and social media. Given the number of performances, the recording was done over 4 months, and very soon the recording will be aired on TV. Some 700 artists have been given the opportunity to perform, and cachet of a total amount of 5.5 million rupees have been paid to them. Mr. Speaker, sir, we have recognized the effort of local filmmakers who have been acclaimed internationally and who have been rewarded accordingly to further, and we have rewarded artists to further encourage them, prosper in the field, and become an example for others to do so. At grassroots level, the MFDC is holding short film competitions at different levels, including in schools, while we are providing support through the Film Assistance Scheme. 2 calls have been launched. The first call, 48 applications have been approved for a total amount of 3.3 million rupees. For the second call, the evaluation of 175 applications received is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, sir, to open the doors for our artists for international exposure during the ongoing financial year, over 20 artists have been supported through the International Travel Grant to be able to showcase their artistic creations on the international scene. This support has helped artists such as Anonyme to perform at l'Olympia in France. These opportunities have also enabled them to create networks and market their works on a larger market. This initiative will be consolidated in the budget for the next financial year, where a proposal is made for new line items, scheme for international award and scheme for international competition participation, for which provisions of 1 million rupees each are made. And I thank Honorable Nagalingam for addressing the issue of artists, and I wish to reassure him that what we have as scheme which is existing at the level of the ministry is the International Travel Grant, which, as I said, 20 artists have already benefited for the last financial year. And what we're introducing this year is different, is allowing artists to participate in international award ceremony and also international competition. So there is these different schemes that are being introduced to additionally cater for their participation at international level. Au total, Mr. Speaker, sir, we have in terms of figures for this financial year 2021-2022, have been able to assist and provide resources to more than 2,700 artists in all artistic form combined. As for this financial year, we are happy to note that not only all our present schemes will continue to exist and continue to benefit artists in the current format, but the Minister of Finance has made an additional provision for an amount of 37 millions de roupies for artists under the National Resilience Fund. This adds up to the provisions made for the calendrier culturel and the sport and culture voucher, which will further help enhance the artistic sector. Which means not only can we now readapt our schemes and assistances, but we can also cater for new emerging artistic forms and develop additional platforms for performances. While our artists are doing their effort and upping their performances, we should, on our side, be creating an enabling environment to further their growth. And here, we have to spur, detect, nurture, and support new talents. Il est primordial que la pépinière des talents artistiques de notre République soit bien encadrée et mise en avant. And a provision of 5 million rupees have been made for the Artist Incubator Scheme, which permit the talent of our future stars to come to light through the mentoring by established artists and actors in the sector. And we should not rest on our laurels. The world is evolving. Art is evolving. Today, we are talking about NFTs, the metaverse, artificial intelligence, the evolution of intellectual property. We cannot continue to function as we did decades back. It is also important that we quantify today the contribution of the creative industry to the GDP of the country so as to be able to identify the potentials of each area of the sector for proper policy decisions. A dedicated statistics unit for the artistic and cultural sector is deemed to be necessary and long overdue. We have already started consultations with UNESCO on this specific issue. In this sense, I welcome the provision made for consultancy services for a strategic plan for the arts and creative sector, as it is crucial for having a vibrant artistic sector contributing to the economic and social welfare of our citizens. Mr. Speaker, sir, this brings me to something which is very dear to me, copyright and MAZA. Since September 2021, MAZA has a director on contract to ensure that measures put in place are being implemented and also to deal with the very challenging issue of collection and distribution of copyright fees. Despite a fall in collection, a total of 21.9 million rupees has been distributed to 1,560 right owners over the current financial year. In November-December 2021, MAZA distributed some 20 million to more than 1,500 right owners, local, while in May and April of this year, MAZA distributed over 2 million to over 2,000 right owners. Distribution to foreign sister companies is also being catered for. Mr. Speaker, sir, the last board of MAZA was constituted in May 2018, and the mandate of the elected member came to term in 2021. Elections were due to be held in June 2021, but due to the lockdown period and the prevailing sanitary restrictions relating to the COVID-19 pandemic, elections could not be held. But fortunately, following legal advice obtained from SLO, procedures have been initiated for the elections at MAZA, and elections are expected to be held next month. Having said that, there is a need for reviewing the functioning of MAZA for better collection and distribution of copyright fees, and implementing the new regulations for the benefit of its members. Following recommendations of the OPSG, a technical committee is following up on the implementation and the restructuring of MAZA, and it is important that this restructuring exercise is for a long-term efficiency. This budget has accordingly made provision for consultancy services to enable the society to benchmark itself with the best international practices, thus ensuring more proficiency in terms of operation. Mr. Speaker, sir, before moving to the cultural heritage sector, I wish to stress on the fact that after 2 difficult years, the creative sector is in a phase of recovery. And for such recovery, not only should we rethink how to operate, but also how to enlarge l'assiette des participants ce secteur. And I'm happy that the Minister of Finance has demonstrated a keen willingness to support this recovery and introduce several new measures to support and help revitalize the sector. And I will refer to the budget speech, which relates that a scheme to facilitate the participation of local talents in international award ceremony, as mentioned earlier, has been introduced. Le Côte d'Or National Sports Complex to be equipped to host major concerts by local and international artists. And here I wish to clarify an issue which has been raised by some artist friends, is that Last year, there was this consideration that was given by the Ministry of Youth and Côte d'Or for a collaboration for artists to use Côte d'Or complex to organize events and concerts. Unfortunately, when we effected our technical assessment last year, it occurred that the acoustic of the premises were not appropriate to host audio or concerts within the premises. But now we are made to understand that these acoustic equipments will be made available and will be properly set up in the Côte d'Or National Sports Complex to enable that we correct those deficiencies in terms of acoustic, in terms of son, and that will allow Le Côte d'Or Sports Complex to host these major concerts. And the arrangement that we have, the understanding that we have with the Ministry of Finance and the Ministry of Youth is that these premises for local artists will be made available at a very low rate, at the concessional rate concessional. The other very important measures which were announced, which will benefit again artists and will help them in operating, in performing, and ensuring that there is a stable source of revenue in terms of performances, is l'annonce in the context of the 55th anniversary of the independence, les 12 fêtes nationales that will be organized throughout the year in 12 different locations that will create a whole new environment for artists to be able, et toutes les disciplines confondues, to be able to participate and make good use of these platforms and of course benefit from a source of revenue à travers ces activités. Et j'en passe les autres mesures, par exemple Mauritius Arts Expo et the provision of a grant of 5,000 to all registered artists, et surtout the decision for the government to adopt a public policy to purchase local works published each year. All these measures cumulated together, when you add up all these that have been announced, all those measures which are existing, all the measures which are being restructured and revamped, will certainly help revitalize the creative sector. As I said, we are in a phase of recovery after 2 years of inability to perform and to operate properly. So these measures with the funds that have been made available, the 37 million rupees that have been made available additionally to support artists will definitely make a big difference. And I believe that all these measures, existing and newly introduced combined together, will serve as the right catalyst to boost the sector to new heights. I also wish to reassure nos amis les artistes that we will work together, the government and the artist community, to reshape the creative sector. Et à cet effet, dans les semaines qui viennent, le ministère organisera un atelier avec les artistes de différentes disciplines pour échanger et pour accorder les besoins et les attentes du secteur avec les mesures et projets du ministère. So this will be the right platform to be able to interact with all the artists and to be able to understand the projects and the measures being implemented, but also to ensure that we respond and we respond to all the aspirations and all the demands and requests from the community. Mr. Speaker, sir, coming to the cultural heritage sector, last year, my ministry spearheaded, with the support of the Municipal Council of Port Louis, the Ministry of Local Government, and other stakeholders, in succeeding in Port Louis being enlisted as UNESCO Network of Creative Cities. On 8th of November 2021, Port Louis joined the network, and consultations have started with different stakeholders to make the city more culturally vibrant and network with other creative cities. This designation will further contribute for sustainable urban development and will provide the platform for actors in the cultural and creative industry to express themselves. In November last year, we have also submitted the nomination for inscription on the memory of the World Register of UNESCO of the archival records of the Bienheureux Pierre Laval, and that of the slave trade and slavery records in Mauritius. The documents proposed for nomination are unique, consisting of valuable information which have marked the history of the country. Regarding our archival heritage, the much-awaited purpose-built complex to house the National Archives and National Library at Moka is progressing positively. In May 2022, invitation has been issued by the Indian authorities for expression of interest by Indian applicants, the deadline of which was the 6th of June 2022. I'm informed that the said deadline has been extended to 13th of June 2022 based on the request of few applicants. With respect to our built heritage, an amount of 8.7 million rupees has been spent for the rehabilitation and upgrading of La Tour Kénique. It now houses the L'Espace L'Art since its opening in October 2021. L'Espace L'Art is a place to perpetuate arts and permits to give space to the creative potential of our artists. 93 artists have already had the opportunity to showcase their works of art. They're in 3 exhibitions, and some 70,000 art lovers have attended these exhibitions. Such example of putting to life inherited building will be continued, and provision has been made for the consultancy services of 2 historic buildings, Batterie de l'Harmonie and l'Ex-Beaujolais School. The NHF has contemplated the rehabilitation of various national heritage sites, including La Tour Hollandais at Vieux-Grand-Port, the monument commemorating the wreck of the Saint-Géran at Poudre d'Or, and the uplifting of a series of monuments in Port Louis. Through the Victoria Urban Terminal, the Victoria Station, and the Artillery Square have been rehabilitated and restored. And to safeguard our heritage sites, regular conservation and maintenance is required, and there is a need to have a dedicated team to carry out this specialized work, and the NHF will be setting up shortly a conservation unit. We have also supported the effort of 4 listed private museums by encouraging them to carry on with their activities, including Musée de la Photographie. Regarding Musée de la Photographie, may I, Mr. Speaker, sir, take this opportunity to put on records the contribution of its founder, late Tristan Breville, in the preservation of a rich part of our history. We are, myself and Honorable DPM, in contact with his family to see how the government can help to ensure that his collections are preserved and made accessible to the public. And finally, Mr. Speaker, sir, the National Heritage Fund has also launched in April this year, a modern app on heritage in Mauritius to facilitate the visit to heritage sites and learn on our tangible and intangible heritage at the touch of a screen. Mr. Speaker, sir, provisions are being made in the next financial year for the upgrading of 2 existing theatres under the ministry, the Serge Constantin Theatre and Pointe Canon Theatre. There was, however, a need to have a cultural infrastructure in the northern part of the island to cater the needs of artists. And a provision of 57 million rupees, of course, spanned over 2 years for the National Arts Centre at Petit Raffray will help overcome, to some extent, this shortage. The centre will be implemented in 2 phases, will comprise the Arts Centre in the first phase and the amphitheatre, amongst others, in the second phase. The centre will provide a venue for performances by artists, and the infrastructure will also be used for training and hosting of creative activities. The creation of a recording studio will also help artists, especially those from grassroots level, to carve their way in the artistic field and save on the cost of recording. Mr. Speaker, sir, allow me now to say a few words on projects announced in my constituency number 6. And I wish to thank Honorable Padeachi for allocating funds for various projects in constituency number 6. Inhabitants of the constituency have, without any reserve, welcomed the proposed projects. And since the last election, me and my colleague, Dr. Anjeev Ramdani, are toiling day after day to implement and follow up on projects in the various villages in the constituency. There are issues, of course there are issues. There are issues everywhere, all across the country, in all villages, in all towns. And there will always be issues. No one can deny that. But aujourd'hui, il y a cette volonté to solve these issues. We, as the two elected government MPs, Anjeev and myself, are committed. We are committed to resolve these problems. We are leaving no stone unturned, whether it is Goodlands, Rocheterre, Grand Gobe, Poudre d'Eau, Solitude, Grand B, Cap-Prin-le-Heureux, Fond-du-Sac, or Vale. We are working and will continue to serve our constituency. Before concluding, Mr. Speaker, sir, one of the opposition speakers yesterday invited students and the population to do a search in the budget speech and search for the words productivity or efficiency. I've kept this one for the last, before concluding, because it will help us understand the sense of this budget. So one of the opposition speakers yesterday invited students and the population to do a search in the budget speech and search for the words productivity and efficiency. Well, I went home and I did search for these words. And he's right, for once. He's right. The budget does not contain the words productivity and efficiency. But I also did another search. I searched for the word people. People. Because people is the very reason why this budget was presented. And I invite everyone, like the invitation was launched yesterday, I also invite people to do a search for the word people. And you will find that at the very heart of this budget, this government has placed its people, the people of Mauritius. And when you see the conclusion of the budget speech, it speaks a lot about, as I said at the start of my speech, about the philosophy of the government. Not only to present a budget with the people or for the people, but to work in favor of the people. Just a couple of lines draws the essence of this whole exercise, draws the essence of the whole reason of governance of this government. 350,000 individuals will obtain a monthly income allowance. 300,000 individuals will see an increase in their pensions. 189,000 youth will receive a passeport culturel. 169,000 retirees will get a CSG retirement benefit. 110,000 households will no longer pay the municipal tax on their residence. 100,000 income taxpayers will have more money in their pocket. 18,000 households will benefit from an increased support on the social aid and RSM. 10,000 individuals will now earn a CSG disability allowance. Et pour terminer, 10,000 youth and women will be eligible to a prime à l'emploi. And I'm proud to say that this is a budget presented by MSM-led government with Honorable Padeachi as Minister of Finance. Congratulations to you, my dear colleague, and Honorable Pravin Kumar Jagannath as Prime Minister, a true leader in all sense of the word, leading a government with the people and for the people. Thank you, Mr. Speaker, sir.